Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, not leaving your seats and just staying there. So this is, I think one of the third year or so in a row that we've done a virtual reality panel. And sometimes I can't really tell kind of the room in terms of what people are actually feeling about VR at any given point. Right now, VR has a lot of problems it's working on, some of which it's solved, some new ones have come up. A big one has always been content, and Baobab Studios is a well-funded, well-staffed version of a VR studio. And Maureen, I think it's interesting you came from being a VP at Zynga. Why come and take a risk on VR at this point in time?
The truth is I've wanted to do animation my entire life. My undergrad major was computer science, art, and psychology, but my immigrant parents told me I'd be poor and destitute if I followed my dreams and went into animation, so I didn't do it for a long time. But it also didn't, I was trying to figure out a business way, a way to make it make sense from a business perspective, because for the animation industry especially, it takes, say, 5 years to create an animated film at Pixar. So you spend a lot of time working on something not knowing if it's going to go well. And if you don't have a theme park division to buffer against a flop, your company might die. So I was trying to figure out how to merge both my creative love for animation with the business practicality of it. And at Zynga, I still kept on doing animation nights and weekends with my friends at Pixar, but I couldn't figure out how to make it a true business. When VR came along, to be honest, I was very skeptical. I thought, oh, they've been trying to do this forever. I'm sure it's not here yet. But then when I tried it on, actually, I hated it when I first tried it on because it was live action and all I could notice was the pixels and the poor resolution for the early headsets. And our standards for reality are super high, so I was distracted by that. But when my engineers at Zynga hacked our new game into the headset just for fun, I realized it was the future of animation, because animation is about taking you to completely different worlds and making you feel it's so real that you could think you could reach out and touch it. And that's also the definition of VR. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is the future of VR and animation. I love it. But then it also made sense from a business perspective, because no one has an advantage. It's starting from scratch because there's technological disruption, which makes there great opportunities for many people to start a new industry fresh.
Yeah. So before we go too deep down the VR rabbit hole and kind of everything going on with it, I think the story about how you became VP at Zynga is kind of a cool one to relay to the audience. So you just went in and kind of asked for it.
Yes, it was actually the promotion to general manager. There was a time where I was executive producer and director of product, and I was pissed off because I knew I deserved to be general manager, and I wasn't promoted yet. And there's enough time that you start feeling there's something wrong with yourself when you know that your numbers, everything is better than all your peers. And I was at this rage quit level. I didn't care anymore. So I just asked my Harvard Business School professor to send me all the articles on women in leadership. And he sent them to me, and I started printing them out and highlighting parts that I felt were relevant to me. And I actually gave it to my boss and said, you're doing this to me. I had a very good relationship with my boss. I felt completely comfortable doing this. We're very close friends, and he's actually my advisor right now. And he said, I realized the reason I hadn't promoted you is because I felt protective of you because you're a woman. And if you're a man, I would have already promoted you to go swim with the sharks. And I realized that it's not fair that I haven't promoted you yet, and then he immediately fixed it. But if I hadn't talked to him about it or presented him with anything, that would have never happened, and I would have continued feeling bad about myself. So I do think a lot of, in terms of raising women, power is about educating men just as much as it is educating women.
Sure. It seems like for how small the VR industry is, there's a good deal of controversy in it right now, especially related to how women are treated. Any ideas on what's going on there?
Well, I think it's the best time. It's a huge opportunity for us to do something good. A lot of the tech industry and gaming industry is male-dominated because there was probably a lot of people in the beginning, it was founded by men. But now that it is a level playing field, we don't really have an excuse to not step up. We can be part of be part of the founders, the investors, at least women can be, and minorities as well, in shaping what that is. And I'm really excited about all the efforts that there are about that, and I'm happy about people exposing the issues that are there. But I do think ultimately it comes from top down, especially investors, and I'm really looking forward to there being more female investors, because I can do what I can do. So at Zynga, for example, for the Farmville franchise, we had more women and minorities, I believe, than many of the other teams. And I don't think it's because I purposely sought out to be more diverse. It just happened to be maybe because I was really comfortable in hiring people that were different. And so there's this natural tendency to hire people that you're comfortable with. So the more women or minorities you have in higher positions, I feel a lot of it will naturally also come.
Mm-hmm. So kind of zooming out, Baobab Studios, you're approaching the content problem of VR. A lot of people have a lot of reservations, it seems. I mean, it could just be the media, but I don't think so. It's about where the VR industry is going and, you know, if there's a real future for it in the next decade or so. What are your thoughts here? I'm
surprised by how much stress there is about this topic, because I knew that most technologies follow the Gartner hype cycle, where there's the hype cycle, the trough of disillusionment, and then hockey stick up. And when I talk to venture capitalists, at least the really good ones, none of them questioned that VR would become a thing. The question was, are you too early, and when is it going to come? Mm-hmm. And my tact was, instead of saying, VR is here, it's going to be here now, I said, hey, VR is going to be a really long and bumpy ride, which is part of the reason why we did seek a lot of strategic investment. And this is how I'm going to save money, conserve, keep my burn rate low, and this is how I have a massive decision tree on how the developments of VR are and how I'm going to last through the trough. And I believe that that's where we are right now in the trough. But there's no question that VR is going to become a thing. It's just the rest of us who are surviving and make sure that we're here doing the hard work of creating the content, creating the industry so that it can reach the mass market. What makes you confident this is the wave that's going to hit that hockey stick, though? Well, I think right now we're in the trough. Okay. I think the thing that's really necessary is more content, because imagine just all of you, for you to buy a headset, what does that require? For Nintendo Switch, for example, I was one of those people who was in line clicking refresh forever because it was sold out, just because I want to play Zelda. So there needs to be a piece of content, and it's so expensive to buy a Switch, and I probably will never play any other game, but that's okay. It was worth it to me because I want to play Zelda. Mm-hmm. So imagine there's an amazing piece of content, or you know that there's many pieces of content. Okay, I'll shell out the money to buy the headset. After that, I've watched, say, the 5 hours of really amazing VR content. When I come back next week, there needs to be more amazing content, and there's just not enough very high quality content coming every single week to drive engagement, and you need engagement for there to be a sustainable business model, for there to be constant new content created, and then business models for everybody. So more content. Is the content the problem in getting, when you try virtual reality on like a high-end, not necessarily mobile, there's a real, wow factor experience when you try it out. But do people actually need to own the headsets, or is, location-based options or stuff that ends up being at arcades and theaters, is that, more realistic? I think there's absolutely a place for both, but for LBE, location-based experiences, I think you need to have an even more amazing experience than something that you can just get at home. Because even with a Gear VR or Google Daydream, you can just have that easily at home, or the high-end headset. But if you're going to get somebody to go somewhere, it has to integrate hopefully with something physical. For example, for Void or Nomadic, where you reach out, you see a torch that you can pick up in VR, they actually create a physical torch that you can pick up. Or somebody here touches your knee. In the VR, somebody actually touches your knee, and people are like, oh my God, it's amazing. So it's almost like an amusement park experience, but I do think the bar is even higher for an LBE type of experience. But I absolutely think at home it's huge too. So we believe that one of the reasons that Invasion, our first piece, is one of the top downloaded VR experiences across all the platforms is because it's more universally appealing content. So you have these hardcore games, and you have all the documentaries, and these are two content forms that were made for VR. They're perfect. That being said, for VR to reach the masses, there needs to be content that bridges between, Invasion, our piece, which is about bunnies and aliens, appeals to both kids, grandmas, and everything in between. So when you buy a headset and you want to show it to your friend, unless they love documentaries or hardcore games, you're going to show them those pieces.
Okay. And I think I'm finding at least in my coverage over the past couple months, that because of AR Core and AR Kit from Apple and Google, a lot of, seed stage or pre-seed stage startups are kind of looking to kind of soft pivot towards mobile AR. Is that an area that you think is going to drive that sort of action from other companies?
Yeah, I'm really excited about AR, but I also think AR is going to take time, just like VR is. But it depends on how you define AR, because there's AR on the phone and the iPad or the Google devices, but then there's the AR goggles. AR goggles, I believe, will take even longer, potentially, than VR. Because just think about, let's talk about storytelling for now. For storytelling, it took decades to come up with the cinematic language of cuts, pans, and zooms. We're trying to figure out how that works in VR. Now you have to figure out how that goes in AR, because the benefit of VR is about taking you to a completely different place. It's about escaping, which is why I think it's really great for entertainment. But the strength of AR is integrating it in your current world today. That's a different way of thinking, so I don't think all the concepts are exactly the same, but then a lot of the technology can be brought over. So I think AR goggles will take longer, and AR tablet and phone a lot sooner, but I'm waiting for, of course, applications that come out that will have engagement.
Do you think that phone-based AR is a little overhyped right now?
No, because I'm excited about anything that gets people excited about new technology in the Gulf. But I do think it's really early days, and it's time to experiment right now. I don't think anything coming right out of the gate will be the most useful thing, though I am excited about enterprise applications immediately, especially for training workers, not needing to read through the manual and be able to superimpose on objects how to do tasks.
Okay. So earlier you were chatting about the product cycle for Pixar films coming out and how long that took. What is the effort that goes into a similar VR piece? How does that disparity look?
Usually I would say it takes longer because you have to figure out this whole VR thing now. Sure. It's like, how do you direct the viewer's eyes? CG animation is a relatively mature industry now, but for us, we're able to make it a bit quicker, partially because we are hiring only the most senior talent and because it's a startup, but also because we're merging gaming and film industries, and both industries work at a slightly different pace, actually. So things from film being more waterfall process versus games using more agile Scrum process, merging those two cultures is very difficult, but it creates a new type of medium, and it can be done faster, I believe. Okay.
So are your titles are available for free on most platforms right now?
Yes.
Okay. At what point does that change? How do you price VR content? Is it the cost the same as a video on demand solution, or is it a movie, or is it something else entirely?
So I can give my hypotheses, though I don't have the answer because who knows. So I think there's both in the home business models as well as outside the home, and outside of the home is things that you talked about. So there's licensing the IP outside, but there's also the LBEs. We do have a lot of requests for Invasion because it just won the Emmy, so that one is highly requested by VR theaters everywhere, and so they are willing to license that, so there is revenue streams from that. And also Invasion is getting turned into a feature film, also by Hollywood, which also there's money from that. But in-home, you can either do in-app purchase one by one or subscription models, and I think that there's advertising model as well, and I think there's room for all three. The question is, when is there a large enough consumer base for that to happen? And if you're going for the hardcore market, I think the subscription works when people are moving that, but also the more in-app. But for the large swath, if you're going for mass audience, kind of like at Zynga, then a lot of advertising also works.
Yeah. When you're looking at the indie cinematic and kind of gaming groups, is it a little concerning that Facebook is almost subsidizing a lot of the great content out there, and it's coming from such few companies, all this money?
No, I want even more money. They need to give me even more. But you think about, if you believe that the problem is content, then how do you get more content? It's by funding. And you know that venture capitalists don't like to fund content in general. The reason they funded us is because of the technology component of our company. But where else are you going to get money? So a lot of Hollywood is funding more trailers for their IP, which makes sense, but no one's going to purchase a headset just to watch a trailer. So then where else are you going to go? You're going to go to strategics, and you're going to go to the people who are motivated to get more content, which are the distributors. So it makes a lot of sense to me. But I think it's a great relationship between content creators and the distributors, especially since there's going to be more and more distributors as time comes by. In fact, there are too many, and my team's always complaining that needing to port the content to all these different platforms can be very tedious, but the more, the better for me, because the more funding sources there are for a variety of content.
Yeah, is it problematic that so much of the content is free now? Are consumers kind of like, all right, I bought a $500 headset, I should be able to kind of get a bunch of freebies to entertain myself now at this point?
There are many pieces of content that actually monetize now. So as an entrepreneur, the question is does it make more sense for you? Do you need the money now, or do you care more about more people downloading your content and knowing who you are? And for us right now, given the number of people and headsets out there, right now we've decided to do it for free. But also, to be honest, one of the reasons we've given away our content for free is because we just started our company 2 years ago and we're experimenting. So this is all a big experiment, the pieces of content that we're putting out, and we want the feedback and the data from people experiencing it so that we can make our experiences better. As it progresses, of course, we will definitely charge.
When you're looking at trough of disillusionment, hockey stick, all that stuff, you know, for the last 2 to 3 years, I've heard startups say in 2 to 3 years there'll be an inflection point and VR is going to hit a mass market. Do we even have a kind of timeline anymore, or are we just hoping is the VR industry just hoping it's soon?
I think most people think it's soon, but I have always been more practical probably than most entrepreneurs, which I'd like to remind my team is why we're alive. Like, be cheap. But I think it's going to be, honestly, 3 to 5 years. That's how I personally think. I always have to plan for longer term to make sure that our company is in a good space. I am excited about the native headsets that are created for mobile specifically. So both Facebook and Google are coming out with their standalone mobile headsets that are all inside-out tracking, so you don't have those crazy lasers, and you can walk around with not all the wires, which is a great step in the right direction. That being said, I also think since the performance is similar to a mobile phone, slightly better, we need those to get even better for it to have like super real-time experience in a very great mobile headset. And I think that's going to take a few generations of, a few iterations of the hardware. Okay,
all right, so 2020 to 2022, somewhere around there?
Yes, but hopefully sooner. I would say most entrepreneurs your poll would say in 1.5 years to 2 years.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on stage. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.